of Neurology long ago started this series Legends of Neurology, and it's been going on very well. Today I'll be talking to my teacher, Professor Devika Nag, who has been professor and head of department of KG Medical Universities. In fact, she is considered as mother of neurology and mother of epilepsy because she established 4.5 decades ago these services in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Now you can say Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand combined. She has been a teacher of teachers. She has been president of Indian Academy of Neurology 1999 to 2000. She has been president of Indian Epilepsy Associations and almost all associated and affiliated associations which you can think. She started neurology services in this state, and she's been serving the society and the patients even after superannuation 22 years ago. She is still in active practice. Namaskar, madam. Tell me about your childhood first, where you were born and how your childhood was spent. And I've seen in your drawing room pictures of your mother holding the tiger and lion cubs, and those all fascinating days.
Thank you for this very nice introduction, and I thank the IAN for introducing this topic of legends in neurology, though I think it's a very great privilege to be considered a legend in one's lifetime. And I am so happy to be interviewed by one of my very senior excellent students, and who was also professor of neurology. Now, regarding where I was born, my parents were, I'll tell you about something about my parents. My father was from Dhaka. He was in a feudal family where the big zamandaris in Barodi in East Bengal that time. And he did not want to continue that. He joined medical college, became a doctor, and joined the army. And he was in the IMS and colonel when he died. And my mother was also coming from a highly educated family, and she was Rai Bahadur Jagdish Guha's granddaughter, and they believed in educating both girls and boys, and had also formed many schools and ashrams for widows to be educated in Mayo, East Bengal, now which later became East Pakistan. And after their marriage, they went on a world tour, starting from Burma and seeing Java, Borneo, Japan, China, USA, and then from there they went to England, and that's the place where I was born, in Hammersmith Hospital in 1938 in December. And suddenly the war broke out. My father was very anxious to go to Europe because he was also educated in Vienna and was FRCS and MRCP from London and Edinburgh, as well as ZIN, some other degree from Germany. And his professor was Jewish, and at that time Hitler was there in power, and so he wanted his professor wanted very badly that to rescue us, his student, to rescue his daughter, who was professor of linguistics in 27 languages, from Berlin. So with my mother 8 months pregnant, they flew in a non-pressurized plane to Berlin, and that is the lionesses in this Berlin Zoo. And my father was very angry because she was pregnant and anything could have happened if they attacked her. Anyway, they could rescue this professor's daughter up to Switzerland when my father had to return to London. And I was born in Hammersmith Hospital in London. And it was snowing very hard that time. You can see I was a very small baby. And I had an English nanny, whose name was Miss Ethel Graham. And there's a picture of me 1 year old. But by that time, war broke out. My father had to go to Iraq, Iran and Mesopotamia to raise field hospitals for the British and Indian soldiers, because a lot of Indian soldiers were during the World War II. And I unfortunately lost my father when I was 3 years old, and my sister was only a few months old. And there was only my mother, and she was only 22 years old. So I was really born and brought up really. I don't have much memory of my father, but I was brought up entirely by my mother, single-handedly, in Lucknow, where she moved from Calcutta due to the Japanese bombing. She moved to Lucknow, where she had this house, which was gifted to her on her birthday by my father. And then she sent me to this La Martiniere Girls, Calcutta La Martiniere Girls School, which had shifted from Calcutta to Lucknow in Tiloi House because of the bombing from Burma. There was Japanese bombing. At that time, we watched with great thrill the INA soldiers marching of Subhash Bose, as well as Sarojini Naidu and Pandit Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi coming to raise money for the effort to free India, quit India movement at that time. So as a child, I witnessed all this, and I was very impressed. And we used to be, having the Indian, what was now, which is now our national flag, but that time it had a charkha in the middle. And Sarojini Naidu was a personal friend of my parents, and she was the first lady governor of UP. So at that time, I was quite a precocious child and very fond of reading books. My mother put me in school when I was 3.5 years old, and I was a very good student because I didn't have much social activity, and mainly was confined to reading books at home. So between my first class to third class, I got a double promotion, and then after that I was on waiting list for a few months in Christchurch School, and then transferred to Loreto Convent in Lucknow. And at that place, at Loreto Convent, I did my senior Cambridge in the year 1954, and I stood first in Uttar Pradesh, and I got 2 years merit scholarship. After that, my mother was determined that I should become a doctor, and I didn't want to become a doctor at all, because my interest was mainly in writing and reading and becoming an author, becoming a writer. But my mother said a lot of good writers were doctors before, like she quoted Somerset Maugham and Chekhov and a lot of others, Cronin and others. And so somehow she forced me to take science, which I detested. But I went through it and hoping that I will not get into the PMT. That time there was pre-medical test. And as fate would have it, somehow I stood first among all the girl students and got another scholarship for 1 year, and went to Isabella Thoburn College, IT college as it was known those days, and I did my intermediate in 1957. After that, I joined the medical college in 1957 and finished my MBBS in 1962. My batch comprised of 25 girls only and 75 boys. At that time, we were very conservative. None of us spoke to any boy. We all were very scared of them. And especially in the anatomy and the section hall, we were terrified of our seniors and the dead bodies all over the place. And I used to cry every day to my mother, I don't want to become a doctor, you pushed me into this horrible place. Boys used to throw paper pellets at us and all kinds of funny things. They used to write letters and all that. And but we used to be stuck together and were terrified of our seniors, because there was ragging also by the seniors. But fortunately I was a day scholar, so I didn't have that problem. In any case, somehow I went through MBBS and I did MD medicine also in KG Medical College at that time, as it was known, and I opted for medicine, though everyone in the hospital and in the college was against it, and they said, you're a girl, you should only do Daigiri, join gynecs and or take pathology. That's only fit for the girls, because that time there was no pediatric department either. And so then I said, no, I want to do medicine because I don't want to do gynecs. I had my teacher in gynecs was Professor Kutty and Professor Engineer and Professor Meena Mukherjee, and they were very upset that I opted for medicine. Then when I went to medicine to sit for the entrance, then my professors were very angry and they said, why are you sitting in medicine? You should learn how to cook properly and get married. You're taking one seat from a boy, and you will not do anything. You will just get married and forget all about medicine, and I don't think as a girl you should do. And I was very upset after hearing that. And it was the senior teacher, the professor and the head of that medicine department, plus another teacher who happened to become my mentor later on, who said, oh my God, we don't want a woman in this department. We have never had a woman in this department. So we don't want this girl. Tell her not to join here. Let her join gynecs or pathology, or even if she doesn't like that, she can do radiology. That made me more determined that I must join. So eventually I did join because my marks were good, and hence when my feeling was at that time I'll make these people eat their words. And eventually when they found that I used to work very hard, day and night, double and triple more than the men in my department, then they grudgingly accepted that okay, she can do something. So anyway, my mentor at that time was Professor N. Gupta, under whom I wrote my thesis, and he was very interested in neurological cases because he had spent some time in Queen Square, London. So while I was doing my MD medicine, Professor P.N. Tandon, who was one of the finest neurosurgeons and very senior neurosurgeons, he had come from Montreal and he had joined the Department of Surgery as a neurosurgeon. And he used to take very long and detailed histories and rounds in the afternoons. None of the boys used to like to attend to that, so they used to say, you go and go with him for the referral. So I used to go there, but I was very impressed with his meticulous examination, by his discussion with me on the patient, and also my mentor and Professor N.N. Gupta was very interested in neurology, and he also told me, I don't think you should take cardiology because that will be overcrowded field. You take neurology because there is no neurologist in whole of Uttar Pradesh, and he was the only one who was doing neurology at that time. His student, Professor B.C. Katyar, was doing neurology in BHU, Varanasi, but as a part of medicine department. There was no separate neurology department at all in the whole large state of Uttar Pradesh. So it was Professor N. Gupta who really put me on the field of neurology.
It's just a coincidence that I was born the year when you entered the medical school. I heard and I know that you were awarded so many medals, gold medals and all those during
I had
those
to
undergraduates and postgraduate days.
Yeah.
I've also been told that you went abroad for higher studies. So where you went and how come you came back when majority of people will not return after seeing that side and working there?
Well, you see, it was very fortunate. You see, it was in the 60s. I had finished my MD in 1965, and at that time the Vietnam War was at its peak, and all the young doctors were drafted. There was a drafting of all the young men to serve in the US Army in Vietnam, and so there were lots of residencies vacant. So I was very fortunate that at that time, mid-vacancy, I joined Tufts University as a resident in neurology, as well as taking classes as a fellow. So I was in that way very fortunate at that time. And then after, there were 9 of us who did MD medicine. Everyone went to America, USA, for further medical training in different aspects, not especially neurology. But out of which all of them stayed back, except myself, which I came back. But I enjoyed every bit of my stay in USA, because I not only I was in Tufts, but then I had the good fortune to be accepted at Harvard as a fellow in neurology, in which I had teaching duties as well as 1 year of neuropathology as an elective, with rotation in neurosurgery, neuroradiology, and also in geriatric neurology, and also pediatric neurology. So I had a very big exposure to all the greats that I used to read about in India in the textbooks. My teachers were the famous Raymond D. Adams, Dr. Arthur Asbury, Dr. Daniel Brackman, Dr. John Sullivan, and even Dr. Denny Brown. So it was quite a heady experience, and then I was quite shocked that I didn't know anything about neurochemistry or neuropharmacology or neuropathology. These things have come up now, but at that time there was no CAT scan, no MRI, no nothing. We had to do direct carotid puncture, and the system there training is that they used to send us to the best centers. So I learnt my neuroradiology by Juan Taveras, who has written the textbook of neuroradiology, and did all my carotid angiograms and pneumograms and myelograms in New York under his guidance. Then I came back into Boston. Mainly my training was in Boston based. So I stayed there for 5 years, and then my mother had also come join me there because I had taken a flat, and she said, yes, you can earn a lot here, life is very easy, beautiful and everything, but in India you would do better. Here you will earn a lot of dollars and be very rich, but I think you should come back to India. So that, I think, was one reason why I returned, and also the fact that my mother was alone and she had single-handedly brought me up and was responsible for everything that today I am. So I said I must go back, because my sister also had gone to Edinburgh for her, she was also a doctor, but a PhD doctor in English literature. Unfortunately,
This is her picture, and I've been told that she died of cerebral aneurysm rupture.
Yeah.
That's tragic, unfortunate.
Very tragic. But it was my mother's urging that you must come and serve India. You have been trained abroad not to serve Americans. You have been trained, you should do something for the country you were born in. I mean, not I we were not really born in, but of which you are a citizen in. So because of my mother's urging and also the fact that she was alone, and who would look after her if I stayed on there, and she refused to come to USA to settle down.
So KGMU was fortunate that you came back and established a department of neurology in 1975 and 76. And so tell us about some struggle, some hurdles which you faced in establishing the department, and now in last 47 years it has grown very much, and it has a very big hospital department, and you must have had many problems in starting it. And
Well, I am very grateful to my Professor N.M. Gupta, because he struggled a lot to establish 2 or 3 departments separate from the Department of Medicine, which is usually very unusual because people don't like to part with their empires. And when I came back, I was at a loss. There was no neurology department anywhere. Only option was to apply as a pool officer to serve in some other hospital if they accepted you. I wrote to all the professors of large hospitals, but the only one who replied to me was Professor K.S. Mani from Neemhans, but it was in Bangalore, and I did not want to leave my mother alone. So I could not accept his offer. He offered this post of assistant professor at Neemhans to me, and I have his handwritten letter, which was very sweet of him, but I did not join. And I joined instead a Vivekanand Polyclinic, which had just started. There was only 6 rooms built that time, which is now a huge hospital. Vivekanand is now a huge hospital, which is giving even DNB degrees. But at that time there were only 6 rooms and the building was in progress, and I had joined the Vivekanand Polyclinic. It was then called the Ramakrishna Sevashram, and I did general medicine, pure neurology. It is just that by the superhuman efforts of Professor N.M. Gupta that he managed to get the government to grant us a department of neurology with 32 beds and 3 staff members, plus residents that would rotate from neurosurgery, medicine and psychiatry. And the department, I was made a head of it, all right. I never was an associate or a lecturer. I was appointed straight away as reader. My experts were Professor N.H. Wadia, Professor T.K. Ghosh, and Professor E.B. Barucha. And then after that, I joined, and I was the only, I think that picture, the department, I was the only woman member of the Department of Medicine. And in 1976, the Department of Neurology, a separate building and separate Department of Neurology, the first one in Uttar Pradesh, was inaugurated by Professor N.H. Wadia from the eminent and very, I think, real legend, and I think one of the most brilliant neurologists that India has produced. He had inaugurated the building and the department. And this picture you can show.
yes.
And at that time, I was very fortunate to have a neurosurgeon, and that neurosurgeon was Professor V.S. Dave, who was also trained in Montreal, and he also had come as professor of neurosurgery, and it was well known to Dr. Wadia also, because he had worked in Bombay, and he was very supportive and was one of the only few neurosurgeons who were not constantly battling with the neurologists. So he was an extremely gentle person and very, very cooperative. When I had nothing, he lent me his EEG machine with technician until I got my own. And in all this, Professor N. Gupta worked day and night to get all this done. But once the department started, I had a lot of problems. It was uphill, as they say, all the way. Very difficult. Most of the teachers in the medicine department resented so much my becoming associate professor, what you would call reader, over their heads, and superseding so many of them who were senior to me in say experience or joining in years, and they were extremely hostile. I was really belittled at every stage, but I just hung on. I wanted to prove my worth, and I think that's one of the reasons I never got married. I wanted to prove that I was equal to any of them, if not better. So eventually it happens that way that Uttar Pradesh had the first neurology department created, and in 1981, after MCI inspection, we had the very first DM neurology course started. I started with 3 staff members, and eventually the department grew, and at that time I was very, very interested in making the department similar to what I had seen abroad in Boston, and wanted everyone to read papers, and I was so impressed with all the neurologists that I met here in India, all the real great legends. That means Professor Wadia, Dr. Barucha, Dr. Singhal, Dr. Darab Dastur, and Dr. Arjun Das, Dr. Krishnamurti Srinivas, Dr. H.V. Srinivas, and Professor Ramamurthy, and Dr. Jagannathan. All these were very senior people, and I met them. And one of my previous colleagues was Dr. M.C. Maheshwari, was senior colleagues. He had also become a neurologist, and he was in the AIMS. So I was exposed to a lot of very, very wonderful neurological colleagues, because I went to every conference, and eventually I had some very good friends. I made with some very good friends from Bombay, from Calcutta. Dr. T.K. Ghosh was very supportive. In fact, he sponsored one of the projects for entrepreneur and its effects on the nervous system to me, and also Dr.
Shamal Sen,
Dr. Shamal Sen, Dr. Madhav Bhattacharya. These were my contemporaries then, and at that time I was really very thrilled to have made it, finally made it.
I remember as a student, as a resident, that you were very strict. You were punctual in time and in rounds, and sometime you will just enter the washroom, toilets and see, and so the sisters and Safai Kamcharis, sweepers, they are very apprehensive that you may check, and if found dirty they will be scolded. So this was a little unusual for a head and a clinician to go and check how clean are the toilets, how clean are washroom, just for sake of well-being of the patients and those who are attendants, those who are using. So this was a little unusual for young residents like me, but it was, you may be very strict. You felt, everyone outside felt that you were very strict. But I know that you were very soft inside, and as a resident we remember that sometime there was no electricity in the hostel for a day or two, and so no mess was working. And as you got this news, when you came to the department, you came with full bags with sandwiches made at home and other things. So this was your superhuman and kind nature, that you knew that once the mess is off, is not working, the resident could not have taken breakfast. So at 9 we were all served good breakfast, and then only we went for our ward work. So this shows your human nature and softness, which many of you students maybe knowing, but majority of persons are not aware. So, you are very keen in teaching clinical methods. Today, the things start with investigations. The patients come with headache, and then patient will think, doctor will think CT scan normal, these are the causes, CT abnormal. So, but at your time, and still you do that is the clinical methods, going into the details of history, examining, doing fundus examination of every patient. So, what is your message for young neurologists, or those who are still a student, or those who are entering the practice, that still that clinical neurology remains very important even today?
It really does, because I think the problem now is that people are not, they are so dependent on technology. Technology is very useful, no doubt. I am so thankful for MRIs and CTs and PET scan and all the other paraphernalia we have, EMGs, EMCV, single fiber and all that. But basically, you remember, when we are treating patients, we are treating not a disease only, we are treating another human being, and you have to take a proper clinical history and establish a rapport with the patient as a doctor as well as a patient. I think it's good in your healing process also. Most people, they just do the tests and then I remember one case of headache, and they went through every test in the book, and actually the patient had very high blood pressure, but no one took the blood pressure. That was the problem. And I thought that was very, very funny, because the person had malignant hypertension, and that was the cause of the headache, and had hemorrhages in his condyle. So until you examine the patient, you have to examine. First you make your diagnosis clinically, and then you can have the tests. The tests make it very fast and rapid. And my interest was mainly in neurotoxicology, because there was an outbreak of paralysis in Lucknow, and at that time the IITR, which is now the ITRC was then, had Dr. Zaidi as the director, and he wanted, the government of UP wanted investigation into these paralysis cases. So he wanted a clinician, so he asked Professor N. Gupta, and he suggested my name, and with a team of junior residents, we went to the village, and we discovered it was basically lathrism with very high manganese levels. Then that made me interested in neurotoxicology. We studied this, not only lathrism, we studied fluorosis in UP, we studied lead, and all the work that was done was also, one of my students who was professor and head of department in SGPGI, Professor UK Mishra. He was my student, and he did a lot of work with me on organochlorine, pesticide poisoning, and organophosphate poisoning, as well as aluminium phosphide poisoning and lead neuropathies. And we worked on jewelers who worked with all these metals. And at that time, the India Today had a cover on it, on pesticide, poison in your food, and I still have it. It was in 1960s, in 1970s, and Raj Chengappa was the person who interviewed me, and he showed all the work we had done, all our rice and dal and all our fruits and vegetables. They all have pesticide residue, and that the highest pesticide residue was in buffalo milk, and not on less so in cow's milk, because the fat content was higher. Then all the research that I did through my students in that thesis, I gave subjects like work on cannabis and its effect on the cognition, neurophysiology, and other neurological features. Cannabis. Then I was a member of the Bhopal Gas Commission in 1984, and they had that horrible thing in outbreak of the Bhopal gas disaster, Union Carbide. and that worked, followed through, and we published a lot of work. And all this toxicology work I have presented at the IN meetings also, conferences. And my final thing to all the young neurologists is that you are much smarter than I was ever. But if you work hard and if you are very sincere, you have to be honest to yourself and to the patient. And please have empathy for the patient. Don't treat them just like it's a disease. And like now I notice some people say, we've got 2 headaches, 3 strokes, and a person is not only a stroke, a person is first a human being. And we too are human beings. And I think after being a sort of a patient of Corona, COVID last year in 1921, I know what it is to be a patient. And to be a patient and to have a sympathetic doctor is really good. And it is, you must at least, if nothing, you must at least inquire about, and not only see the reports and everything. Because this kind of thing, lots of people say that, we prefer those old-time doctors who used to talk to us. A lot of people have personal problems which they don't want to tell the person, the doctor, because they are frightened. Or the doctor is so busy that he hardly gives 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes. They want a doctor who also listens to their problems. And a lot of patients actually become your friends, because after all, we are also a human being.
After superannuation, Dr. Devika Nag is working for last 24 years at the Mayo Institute of Medical Sciences in Gomti Nagar, and she is still available for patients. One thing I found interesting, she'll phone every 15 days or so and will inquire that there's a prescription in which there's a drug ABC, what this contains of. And she'll keep MIMS and other issues, but still if she can't find out, she'll phone. I'll tell that this contains this drug, or she will phone me that who is head of radiotherapy at KGMU or who is head of cardiology there, I wanted to send a patient. So once she want to send a patient, she want to ensure that patient reaches to the right person in right time and is taken care of. Or she may even phone those 3 people whom she is sending the patient. While if I have to send a patient to the KGMC for some work, I'll say go to this department and get the things done. But she'll make sure that the patient is taken care of. She'll speak to the doctor there, which she'll arrange the things. So this I'm still to learn from her, that how to be extra sympathetic, empathetic, and to take care of your patient. Every patient becomes a very personal patient of her, and there's the quality still I have to learn from them. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. I'm still learning neurology and human being and being a good human being, and it is fortunate. I'm privileged to be your student.
I am very proud of all my students. All my students have headed departments of neurology, and it is a matter of great pride. At least in front of me, I have seen at least 42 DM neurologists, and they've done very well. Everyone has been
and they are all settled in different corners of the country,
and they are doing very well. And some have gone
raising
abroad.
flags, yes, and abroad also.
And another thing I would just like to add is that all my students have made me very proud. I feel they are like my children, and I am very proud of them. And one of them is you, of course.
Thank you, ma'am.
And